You know what's fascinating? The moment you stop chasing her, the moment you pull back, suddenly she starts to notice you in a way she never did before. Isn't it interesting how distance can create more attraction than constant presence? When you give a woman space, something subtle but extremely powerful begins to take place inside her mind. Curiosity is one of the strongest psychological triggers in human behavior. When someone is constantly around us, always present, always available, our brain begins to treat that presence as predictable. Predictability reduces excitement, and excitement is what keeps attraction alive. But when that same presence suddenly shifts into absence, the human mind can't help but notice. It starts to ask questions. It starts to search for answers. That absence is not just silence. It becomes a statement. It becomes energy that she feels even without you saying a single word. This is why space creates curiosity, because the moment you are not readily available, she becomes more attentive to the little things she might have ignored before. She wonders why you are not calling, why you are not texting, why you are not chasing anymore. And that curiosity starts to draw her mind back towards you in ways that constant attention never could. Think about it. When someone gives us their full attention all the time, it almost feels like we can predict the script of their behavior. We know they will call in the morning. We know they will text in the afternoon. We know they will ask us how our day is going. And while consistency is valuable, it can also lead to a kind of emotional numbness when it is not balanced with a sense of intrigue. Now, when that pattern suddenly breaks, when the text does not come, when the call is not made, the brain reacts with heightened alertness. What happened? Why didn't he reach out? Is he busy? Is he upset? Or has he simply moved on? These questions run like a loop in her mind because curiosity thrives in gaps of information. The less you reveal, the more her imagination fills the space. And very often, imagination can create stronger feelings than reality itself. This is why in relationships, when you step back, you actually allow her to see you differently. She begins to notice the details of your presence that she overlooked before. She might think about your voice, the way you laughed at her jokes, or even the way you used to make her feel comfortable in silence. Those small things become magnified because they are now missing. Curiosity drives her to replay memories in her mind, to compare how she feels now versus how she felt when you were more involved. And the striking thing about curiosity is that it doesn't let the mind rest. It keeps her engaged even when you are not around. In fact, it often engages her more deeply than if you had continued to send her constant reminders of your presence. Another layer to this is how curiosity ties into self-perception. When you were always available, she felt certain about her place in your life. She knew without a doubt that no matter what, you were there. But when you step back, she starts to question where she stands. She might wonder, did I do something wrong? Did I push him away? Has he lost interest? That uncertainty sparks curiosity, and curiosity drives action. It can lead her to reach out, to initiate conversations, to check in when she normally would not have. And all of this is fueled not by pressure or convincing, but simply by the silent power of distance. Curiosity is also magnified by the fact that human beings are naturally drawn to mystery. Think about the way a book keeps us hooked because we don't know how the story ends, or how a movie pulls us in because we want to know what happens next. That same mechanism applies here. By stepping back, you create a storyline in her mind where the next chapter is unclear. She wants to know what you are thinking, what you are doing, what your life looks like without her constant involvement. That desire to know is curiosity at its peak, and it can become so strong that it overrides her initial reason for pulling away. Would you like me to do the same? 600-word expansion? For each of the other 6 keynotes too, so you end up with a full, detailed speech draft? Scarcity has always been one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. From the way we desire limited edition products to the way we feel anxious when something is about to run out, scarcity makes us pay attention in ways abundance never can. In relationships, the same principle operates with even more intensity. When you are always available, always accessible, always saying yes no matter what, your presence becomes abundant. And abundance, though comforting, can dull appreciation. But the moment you take a step back, the moment you are no longer on constant standby, suddenly your presence becomes scarce. That scarcity changes the way she perceives you, because when something is not easy to get, it instantly becomes more valuable in the human mind. She starts to realize that your time, your attention, your energy are not limitless resources. And that realization makes her value them far more deeply than when she thought they were always guaranteed. Think about the way people treat things that are limited in number. A diamond, for example, is just a stone until you attach the concept of rarity to it. Then suddenly it becomes precious, something people are willing to protect, treasure, and even fight for. The same psychology applies to your presence. When you are always around, always reaching out, always pouring your energy into her regardless of her response, there is no perception of rarity. But when you pull back, when you create scarcity, she begins to recognize that what you were giving was not just ordinary, it was something of unique value. It's only when she can't easily access you that she truly begins to realize how much you added to her life. Scarcity also changes the dynamics of attention. When you were fully available, she might have taken your calls for granted, skimmed over your messages, or assumed that she could always connect with you whenever she wanted. But once your presence becomes scarce, every interaction takes on more meaning. If you do respond, she notices more. If you do show up, she appreciates it more. The small gestures you used to make that once went unnoticed suddenly become magnified. Why? Because scarcity heightens awareness. It signals to her subconscious mind that she must pay closer attention because what she once overlooked is no longer in constant supply. Another powerful effect of scarcity is that it awakens a fear of loss. Human beings are wired to be more motivated by the possibility of losing something than by the possibility of gaining something new. This is called loss aversion, and it explains why people hold on to things even when they no longer serve them. In the context of relationships, when you are abundant, she feels no urgency. She believes you will always be there. But when you step back and create scarcity, the fear of losing you begins to surface. That fear alone can reignite desire because she realizes that losing your presence would mean losing something that brought value, stability, and meaning into her life. Scarcity also builds respect in ways abundance rarely can. When you give someone everything without boundaries, it's easy for them to unconsciously start believing that your time isn't worth much. But when you set limits, when you create space, you indirectly communicate that your life, your energy, and your emotions are valuable. That silent communication earns respect. It tells her that you are not someone who can be taken for granted. Instead, you are someone who understands your worth and expects others to understand it too. And often, this respect is exactly what draws her back, because women are naturally attracted to men whose value is undeniable and whose presence feels like a privilege rather than a guarantee. Scarcity also activates competition within her mind. Even if she doesn't consciously express it, when you are less available, she begins to wonder if others are now benefiting from the attention she once had. She may start to imagine you investing your energy in other people, pursuing your goals with greater focus, or simply living life without needing her validation. That competitive energy doesn't come from jealousy alone. It comes from the recognition that your value is something others could see and want as well. Scarcity places you in a category where your presence is not automatic, and that makes her want to secure her place before someone else does. Do you want me to expand the third keynote, emotional reset, in the same 600-word detailed style next? When emotions run high in a relationship, especially when there has been tension, disagreements, or even a sense of imbalance, the constant closeness can actually make things worse. Being in each other's presence all the time during such moments doesn't allow feelings to cool down or perspectives to shift. Instead, it can amplify the negativity because every word, every silence, every action gets filtered through a lens of frustration. This is where emotional reset becomes crucial. By giving her distance, you are not just stepping back physically, you are giving both of you space emotionally to release the pressure that has built up. Without this pause, it is difficult for her to see clearly, to remember the positive sides of the connection, or to feel that desire to come closer again. Distance works like a reset button, cutting through the emotional noise and creating an opportunity for calmness to return. Think of emotions as a glass of water that is constantly being shaken. When the glass is in motion, the water inside cannot settle. Everything is chaotic and unclear. But the moment you set the glass down and leave it alone, the water slowly calms and becomes clear again. Relationships follow the same principle. When there is too much intensity, whether it's arguments, over-texting, or constantly seeking reassurance, nothing feels settled. But when you step back, when you give space, emotions have time to level out. She can start to separate temporary feelings of irritation from deeper feelings of attachment. The very same love and attraction that seemed buried under layers of stress begin to resurface once the noise fades. An emotional reset also allows her memory to filter what stands out. When someone is always present during a period of tension, the dominant association is frustration. Every interaction feels heavy, like more of the same problem repeating itself. But when you step away, she begins to process differently. The absence of conflict allows her mind to recall moments that were good, moments of laughter, intimacy, or kindness that might have been overshadowed. Without the reset, she might not even notice those memories because the present tension would be too strong. But once distance is created, the mind naturally balances itself by remembering the positive, and this softens her feelings, making her more open to reconnecting. Another powerful effect of emotional reset is how it shifts perspective. When emotions are high, people often exaggerate in their minds. Small issues begin to feel larger than they really are. A single argument can feel like a sign that the entire relationship is failing. But when space is given, her emotions begin to stabilize, and she gains the ability to see the situation more rationally. She may start to realize that the conflict was not as big as it felt in the heat of the moment. She may recognize her own role in creating tension. She may even see how your presence was something grounding that she had overlooked while caught up in negative emotions. None of this perspective can come when the emotional pressure is constantly being fed. Only space allows those realizations to take root. Distance also creates room for longing to replace irritation. When you are always there during an emotional storm, you are associated with the storm itself. But when you step back, her emotions get the chance to detach from that association. Instead of seeing you as part of the frustration, she starts to miss you as part of the comfort. That missing doesn't happen overnight, but as emotions calm, her natural attachment begins to resurface. Missing someone cannot be forced. It happens naturally when space is created. The reset is what makes this shift possible, and it is often the turning point that brings her back with a softer, more open heart. An emotional reset also gives her back her sense of autonomy, which is often essential for attraction to thrive. When emotions are tangled and there is no space, she may feel cornered, as if she has no freedom to process or decide how she feels. This often pushes women further away because nobody likes to feel emotionally trapped. But when you step back, you give her room to process on her own terms. That freedom actually reduces resistance. Instead of pushing against you, she starts to pull herself toward you because the decision becomes her choice, not her reaction to pressure. That shift in dynamic is subtle but incredibly powerful in reigniting attraction. Do you want me to move on and expand the contrast effect into 600 words next, in the same tone and paragraph style? The contrast effect in relationships is one of the most overlooked yet powerful forces that determines how someone perceives your value. Human beings don't evaluate things in isolation. We evaluate them by comparison. We notice differences more than we notice consistencies. When you are always present, always accessible, always giving your time and attention without pause, she has no point of contrast to measure that presence against. It becomes her normal. And the danger of becoming someone's normal is that they stop actively appreciating what you bring because it is always there. But the moment you step back, the moment your presence is replaced with absence, contrast is created. Suddenly, she has to measure what life feels like with you versus without you. That comparison can be striking because it is only in your absence that she realizes the richness your presence added to her daily experience. Imagine a room that is always lit by bright sunlight. When you live in that light every day, you stop noticing how beautiful it is. It becomes background, something expected. But when the sun sets and the room is suddenly filled with shadows, the absence of light is felt sharply. The next morning, when the sun rises again, you notice it in a way you never did before. This is exactly how the contrast effect works in relationships. When you are constantly there, she doesn't register the depth of what you provide. But when you are gone, the darkness highlights the light you once brought, and that absence amplifies appreciation when you do return. The contrast effect also creates a sharper awareness of emotional states. When you were constantly present, her mind may have focused more on the small irritations, the disagreements, or the moments of boredom because there was no break in the flow of interaction. But when you step back, those small irritations fade into the background, and what becomes more noticeable is the gap left behind. The absence forces her to compare the comfort, security, and emotional fulfillment she had with you against the emptiness she now feels. That gap becomes the reason she reconsiders her choices, because contrast always makes value stand out more clearly. Another important aspect of contrast is how it alters routine. When someone is woven into your daily life, their presence is absorbed into your patterns. You become part of the rhythm, almost invisible because of how constant you are. But when you pull back, those rhythms are disrupted. The good morning texts stop, the late night calls don't happen, the little gestures she took for granted are no longer there. That disruption forces her to feel the absence not as a passive idea, but as an active break in her routine. Contrast here is not just emotional, it's practical. It leaves her noticing how many little ways your presence added to her life, ways she never acknowledged until they stopped. Contrast also redefines importance in her subconscious mind. The brain is wired to pay attention to changes, to shifts in patterns, to things that stand out from the ordinary. When you are always available, your presence blends into the ordinary. But when you create distance, you change the pattern. You stand out by not being there. And because the brain pays attention to what changes, suddenly she finds herself thinking about you more, not less. This is the paradox of the contrast effect. Stepping back makes you more noticeable than constant presence ever could. In many cases, contrast is the spark that brings clarity. When she experiences life without you, she may start to realize that what she thought she wanted in the moment, space, independence, or distance, feels very different in practice. In her imagination, pulling away may have felt freeing, but in reality, it can feel empty. That emptiness, compared with the fullness of your presence, creates a powerful realization. The contrast effect reveals what words often cannot, the difference between what she thought she wanted and what she truly values. And in that realization lies the reason why she comes back when you give her distance. Do you want me to go ahead and expand Power Shift into 600 words next in the same deep dive style? When you are the one constantly chasing, constantly proving yourself, and constantly giving without pause, the balance of power in the relationship tilts. She begins to feel like she is the prize, the one who gets to decide how much of her presence and affection she gives, while you are the one trying to earn it. That dynamic, over time, creates imbalance. It strips you of the natural magnetism that comes when a woman feels that she is pursuing something valuable rather than being pursued endlessly without effort. The power shift happens the moment you stop overextending, the moment you give her distance and reclaim your energy. Suddenly, the dynamic is no longer tilted in her favor. She begins to sense that she no longer has the same control over you, and this change can be deeply unsettling for her in a way that often pulls her closer again. When you are always available, she feels a sense of certainty. She knows you will text, she knows you will answer, she knows you will show up regardless of her actions. Certainty in small doses creates comfort, but certainty without contrast kills attraction. Because when someone feels they cannot lose you no matter what they do, they stop investing, they stop trying, they stop appreciating. But when you step back, when you create that gap, the certainty dissolves. Instead of being sure of your next move, she begins to wonder. She starts to feel a subtle loss of control because the dynamic has shifted from her being pursued to her wondering if she now needs to pursue you. That shift in energy is what rebalances the relationship and reignites her interest. Power in relationships is not about domination or control. It is about influence. It is about whose energy sets the tone. When you were always chasing, her energy dictated the rhythm. If she pulled back, you leaned forward. If she withdrew, you compensated. If she ignored, you tried harder. That gave her the power to control the pace. But once you stop reacting and instead choose to pull back, the script flips. You are no longer dancing to her rhythm, and she is forced to notice the change. That noticing creates tension, and tension is the birthplace of attraction. She becomes more invested because the power she once held unchallenged is no longer in her hands. Another important aspect of the power shift is that it redefines your value. When someone is too eager, too willing to do anything, too available, their value is unconsciously diminished. But when someone demonstrates restraint, when they show that they are not afraid to walk away or take a step back, their value rises in the other person's eyes. By creating distance, you are silently communicating that your time and attention are not free, that they are privileges, not entitlements. This unspoken message shifts the power because now she is reminded that you are not dependent on her validation. Instead, she begins to feel that her connection to you must be earned again, and this reversal draws her back into the dynamic with renewed interest. The power shift also awakens desire through uncertainty. When she no longer knows exactly how you will respond, when she no longer has the guarantee of your attention, her mind becomes more focused on you. Uncertainty forces her to think, to question, to replay interactions in her head. This is where the psychological power lies, not in what you do directly, but in what your absence makes her imagine. In that uncertainty, she becomes more invested because the mind is wired to seek resolution when it doesn't have answers. The very distance you create plants those questions in her mind, and those questions pull her toward you. And finally, the power shift creates balance that allows attraction to thrive. A healthy relationship is not one where one person endlessly gives and the other endlessly receives. It is one where both parties feel a sense of value, of mutual pursuit, of equal investment. By stepping back and giving space, you create the environment where she must invest again, where she must reach out, where she must show effort. That balance restores respect, it rebuilds appreciation, and it resets the foundation of attraction that only flourishes when power is shared rather than hoarded by one side. Do you want me to continue with reflection and accountability in the same 600-word expanded style? When you give her distance, you are not only pulling your energy back, you are creating a mirror for her to look into. Relationships often become distorted when there is no pause, no breathing room, no chance for either side to sit with their own thoughts and examine their role in the dynamic. When you are always there, always trying to fix things, always trying to prove yourself, she had no reason to reflect. She could project the blame onto you, distract herself with your efforts, and avoid looking at her own contribution to the situation. But when you stop chasing, when you step back and allow silence to fill the space, she is left alone with her own thoughts. That silence becomes powerful because it forces her to confront herself. She begins to reflect on what she did, how she reacted, and whether her choices were fair. Accountability cannot take root when someone always has a buffer to shield them from self-examination. Distance removes that buffer. Reflection is one of the deepest psychological processes, but it often requires discomfort to be activated. When she felt secure in knowing that you would always be there no matter what, she had no motivation to think critically about her actions. She could act out, withdraw, or dismiss you without fear of consequence because she knew you would still be waiting. But when your presence is no longer guaranteed, discomfort arises. She begins to feel the uneasiness of uncertainty, and that discomfort drives her to reflect. She starts asking herself, did I push too far? Did I take him for granted? Did I mishandle the situation? These questions are born out of silence and space, because without your constant availability, there is nothing to distract her from facing them. Accountability also begins when reflection leads to recognition. At first, she may resist the idea that she played a role in the tension, but the more she sits with the distance, the more undeniable it becomes. Memories resurface, and she notices moments when you were patient but she was dismissive, times when you tried to connect but she chose to pull away, or instances when you gave but she didn't reciprocate. In the heat of closeness, those moments felt small or easy to brush aside, but distance magnifies them. Reflection highlights patterns, and once those patterns are recognized, accountability begins to emerge. She may not admit it out loud immediately, but internally, she starts to see where she was unfair, where she could have done better, and where she failed to meet you halfway. Another layer of this process is that accountability restores balance to the relationship dynamic. When you were constantly showing up regardless of her behavior, she unconsciously assumed all responsibility rested on your shoulders. If something went wrong, it was your job to fix it. If she felt distant, it was your job to bridge the gap. This created an imbalance where she could avoid responsibility. But when you give her distance, that imbalance collapses. Now, if she wants the connection, she has to acknowledge her part. She has to realize that keeping you close requires effort from her as well. This shift in responsibility forces her to see that relationships are not one-sided, and accountability naturally follows when she recognizes her role in keeping or losing you. Reflection and accountability also connect to personal growth. Often people don't change until they are forced to look inward. If you had continued to chase, she would never feel that need. Your constant presence would keep her comfortable in her patterns, even if those patterns were unhealthy. But your distance interrupts the cycle. It creates the space where growth can happen. As she reflects, she starts to become aware of the kind of partner she has been and whether that aligns with the kind of partner she wants to be. That awareness can inspire her to come back, not just out of missing you, but out of a genuine desire to do better and show up differently. This is the kind of accountability that transforms relationships because it is not based on guilt, but on growth. The final layer of reflection and accountability is the emotional weight it creates in her heart. People often don't realize the gravity of their actions until they see the consequences. When she experiences your absence, when she feels the silence, when she realizes you will not always carry the burden for both of you, she is confronted with the reality of what her actions have cost. That emotional weight drives accountability because it forces her to decide whether she wants to continue avoiding responsibility or whether she wants to step up and reconnect with honesty. That decision cannot be forced by you. It only comes when distance allows her to reflect long enough to see the truth. Do you want me to expand the last keynote, the psychology of missing, in the same 600-word style? Missing someone is not just an emotional experience. It is a psychological process deeply rooted in how our minds respond to absence and attachment. Human beings are wired to notice what is no longer available. When something is constantly present, our brains adapt and normalize it, often without us realizing its importance. But when that presence is removed, the absence becomes sharp and undeniable. This is where the psychology of missing begins to work. When you give her distance, you allow her to feel the emptiness left behind. That emptiness is not just about you physically not being there. It's about the emotional presence, the support, the attention, and the energy you once provided. The gap becomes noticeable, and the more she feels it, the stronger the sense of missing you becomes. What makes missing so powerful is that it doesn't require conscious effort. You cannot tell someone to miss you, and you cannot convince them into it with words. It is an involuntary process that unfolds in the subconscious. When you stop calling, stop texting, stop showing up on demand, her daily rhythm is disrupted. She might wake up in the morning and realize there's no good morning message. She might go through her day and notice the absence of your check-ins. She might come home at night and feel the silence where your voice used to be. These small disruptions build into a larger emotional awareness. Each missing piece of her routine reminds her of you, and that repetition plants you deeper in her thoughts than constant reminders ever could. The psychology of missing also ties into memory. When you are present, especially during times of conflict or tension, she might focus only on the negatives, what went wrong, what annoyed her, what she wished was different. But when you step back, her brain begins to filter those memories differently. It starts highlighting the positives instead of the negatives. She recalls the way you made her laugh, the comfort of your presence, the little acts of care that she didn't fully appreciate at the time. The mind has a way of romanticizing the past, especially when it is contrasted with present emptiness. This selective memory strengthens the feeling of missing you because it paints your absence with the colors of nostalgia rather than conflict. Another critical aspect is emotional association. Our brains connect people to feelings. When she was with you, she experienced specific emotions: safety, excitement, validation, comfort, or even the thrill of unpredictability. Once you're gone, she doesn't just miss you as a person, she misses the emotions she felt when you were around. Missing is not only about missing the individual, it's about missing the version of herself that she could only access in your presence. That longing for the emotional states you once unlocked in her becomes a driving force that pulls her attention back toward you. Missing also grows stronger when there is uncertainty. If she knows you will always be there, she doesn't truly feel your absence because the guarantee of your return cancels out the urgency of longing. But when you step back and she doesn't know if or when you will come forward again, the uncertainty intensifies the feeling. The mind hates open loops, and missing is essentially an emotional open loop. It is the unresolved tension of wanting something you no longer have. That tension keeps you alive in her thoughts, sometimes even more strongly than your physical presence did. The psychology of missing also connects to identity. People often don't realize how much someone has become part of their identity until that person is gone. She might not have noticed how much she relied on you for reassurance, how much she looked forward to your words, or how much her day was structured around your presence. But with distance, she sees herself differently. She realizes there is a version of her life with you and a version without you, and the contrast between the two can be jarring. Missing is born out of this recognition because she begins to prefer the version of her life where you were present. At its deepest level, missing is about scarcity and irreplaceability. When someone cannot be easily replaced, when their energy, their presence, and their impact are unique, their absence hits harder. Distance gives her the chance to test whether someone else can fill that space, and more often than not, she realizes they cannot. This realization cements the psychology of missing because it tells her that what she feels is not just temporary discomfort, but a genuine longing for something valuable she cannot find elsewhere. Do you want me to now take all 7 keynote expansions and stitch them together into a full-flowing Sadia Khan style speech?